Hello, and welcome. I hope that you're all making it through your days. That's kind of all that I'm attempting to do right now. I thought it might be kind of fun to do some knitting and talk about knitting. I am currently working on a cardigan. It is a cardigan for my boyfriend, and it is a very big cardigan. So it's taking me a while. I cast this on in October. It was like the end of October, and then I didn't work on it for a bit. But I've been diligently working on it, like putting so many hours into this cardigan since like mid-December, I would say. And that leads me into something that I have been thinking about a lot for honestly years, but I've been thinking about it more in depth lately. And that is that knitting is very time intensive. I consume quite a few knitting podcasts on YouTube, and something I hear pretty much across the board are knitters apologizing for showing a whip multiple times or for working on one project for too long. And I have certainly done this as well, so I'm included here. But I've always kind of thought, why are we all apologizing? Because that's just how long knitting takes. Like, knitting a sweater takes a lot of time. Even if you're a super fast knitter, even if you knit a lot, knitting is just slow. You're creating fabric by hand, and that takes a while. And then if you add in fixing mistakes, making modifications, or learning new techniques that take a while to figure out, or just redoing things that you're not happy with, knitting takes even longer. Like, it's just a slow process. And that can be frustrating at times because it feels like projects can take forever and it can be hard to keep up momentum when you're working on the same thing for months or sometimes even years at a time. But really, like, that's what knitting is. And I think anyone who truly has a problem with that doesn't keep knitting. The rest of us may feel some frustration or fatigue over how slow knitting is, but ultimately we're okay with it because we keep doing it. I think when you try to create entertaining or educational content from your knitting, it highlights how slow knitting is, and creators start to feel a little self-conscious about that, or feel like it's not entertaining enough, or it's not meeting an audience's expectations. And maybe there is a crowd who voices their boredom with seeing the same whips over and over, and that's where that's coming from. But I do think that we're all knitters here. And by the way, I'm saying knitting, but this includes a lot of crafts: crocheting, cross-stitching, embroidery, spinning, weaving, sewing. Like, there's a lot of crafts that take a lot of time, so I just wanted to mention that. So we're all knitters here. We're all aware and accepting of the fact that knitting is slow, and these types of crafts are slow. And even more than just aware and accepting, I think this is appealing to many people. I know that I can get bored with knitting, and I can feel frustrated by how slow it is, but ultimately, I really like this outlet. I like that I can spend hours and hours and hours on a project, and when I finish that project, I know and appreciate the time that I've invested. I like that I have to spend a lot of time to learn and build my skills. This isn't a craft that anyone can just pick up and produce things and set aside. This is something that you truly do have to devote a large part of your life to if you want to succeed. And of course, there are all different levels of investment and levels of success, and you can define that however you want. But I'm acknowledging that, but that's also not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this as a craft that you want to master or at least get really good at. And with that comes a lot of practice. And we see this in so many hobbies and other crafts. Like, there are very few things that people just start out being good at or get good at quickly. I know showing the process of getting good at something, so sharing your knitting mistakes or finished objects that you're not super happy with, can be vulnerable. But that is really what I love so much about knitters on the internet and knitters in general. We have built entire systems around sharing our process. I think that the charm and appeal of knitting on the internet falls away when you remove genuine discourse around it. I know Instagram is kind of known for not being genuine, and it's been interesting to see how as knitting becomes more popular, people try to quickly monetize it and apply Instagram strategies to it. We see lots of really chunky knits using very simple techniques to make it quicker for people to produce, following a lot of the fast fashion trends that will disappear by next season. And I don't really think that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but it has stripped away most of what I like about knitting. I also wonder how honest those people are being about the process itself. I keep thinking of a Carrie Westerman blog post where she says, "Own your achievements rather than compare yourself to other people whose lives may be heavily edited." I know I've started to feel negatively about my own output when looking at how quickly other people seem to be pumping out finished objects. If you want to feel negative about your output of something, don't make it knitting. Make it something that is quicker to produce, because knitting is slow. I suspect there's a big correlation between people who have more time to devote to their hobbies and people who choose to share their projects on the internet. Not everyone, of course, but often the people who have more time, money, resources, and privilege to invest in their hobbies are the people who we see the most and are the people we tend to compare ourselves to. That includes how prolific they are or seem, and of course we look at that and think, wait, I'm way slower than that. How is it possible to be so fast? Am I doing something wrong? Should I be that fast? And maybe for you, the answer is yes. And I thought for me it was yes for a long time. But I'm starting to realize that it's just not that black and white. And if I remove all of the outside influence of the super fast and prolific knitters, I find that I actually really like that knitting is slow. It's one of the few things in my life that I have to be completely okay with it taking a long time to do. For me, there's just not a way to rush the process and still be happy with the outcome. Of course, I'm generalizing here for the sake of talking about this. There's a lot of nuance here, and I'm always aware of the risk of discussing nuanced topics without the time or space to be super nuanced about it. So I'm not stating that this is just how it works. I'm just talking about a facet of what I have come to understand about how we discuss knitting output and how that has affected me and influenced, honestly, my feelings about knitting for myself. My desire in sharing my knitting with the internet is to show my process in learning and becoming better at knitting. Sometimes that's going to involve teaching and trying to share what I've learned in a way that you can understand it. But most often, I'm trying to share what knitting is for me. Unfortunately, I can't devote my life to knitting because I have a job and a home and a million things I need to do all the time, and I'm sure that you can relate to all of those statements. So knitting is really slow for me. It takes me a while, and that also makes me a slow online creator, which, those two things don't really complement each other. And I don't really care about that because I'm not trying to be anything in particular on the internet other than as genuine as I can be about hand knitting with a bunch of strangers. But I'm trying to illustrate the point that the frequency of my online presence is directly influenced by how slow I knit. And there are so many creators out there who are the same way. And even though they're sporadic and I don't always know when they're going to post, and maybe they take long breaks because there's very little obligation to knit or share their knitting, and life is just, as we know, it's batshit and so many things can happen. But all of that included, those are almost always the knitters who I enjoy watching and I look up to and learn a lot from. And I guess I'm just building the case for that. I want to support that type of environment in this community. I'm doing all of this for the fun of it, and I love seeing others do it for the fun of it too. Because even though we have an entire industry around knitting, and there are definitely people who make a living off of it, it's honestly really hard to do that. There's not a lot of money in knitting. And I appreciate that knitting constantly resists quick monetization. I think there are very few, if any, people in our modern society who have gotten rich off of hand knitting. I mean, made a living, yes, but those are two very different things to me. And I love that I can take months to knit a pair of socks, and non-knitters may think, wow, you spent a lot of time doing that. Why not just spend a few dollars on some socks at the store? And I can wear my hand knit socks, and I can know exactly why I spent the time making them, and exactly why I didn't just go to the store and buy a pair instead. I'm curious to know your thoughts and how you interpret slow knitting and what that means to you. I know that it's a topic that gets talked about a lot, but I think it's just taken me a while to understand it and appreciate it for what it is. That is all I have for you today. I hope that you are making it through. I haven't said this yet in a video, so happy 2021, and I will see you next time.